Welcome back, sir.
What's up?
Well, first and foremost, what has it been like up at practice this week as Atlanta's been getting ready for, as Nico Moreno calls them, Hospital FC?
Yeah, basically Portland. I don't know what their practices are looking like these days with all the injuries. Probably trying to wrap guys in bubble wrap so we don't have more for the Timbers. We'll hear, I think, from Giovanni Savarese today. They traveled yesterday to Atlanta, so media availability on the Portland side's a little off schedule and trying to figure that out. From the Atlanta side, I mean, it's rolling. It's in a good spot, and as Gonzalo Pineda has said this week, said it last week too, about they've worked really hard to get to where they are. The intensity levels in preseason were higher than they've ever been, going back to the Tata Martino days. You can actually measure these things in terms of intensity, in terms of workload, in terms of the number of sprints, all these kinds of things that sports science people do. It's been more intense than ever before. So this week was a little bit more of a maintenance week rather than an adding intensity week. When you get to this point in the season too, you're starting to think a little bit more in those lines. And the session that Tuesday was fully open, got to see the whole thing. And I love that Gonzalo's coming over and speaking to everybody before and kind of walking through what the activities are going to be. I've been around the block a few times, so I have a pretty good sense if it's an activity I haven't seen. I kind of can figure out what the purpose is, but I think it's really good for everyone to hear. And one of the things he said was, we're going to have a shorter session in terms of time, but the intensity will be high. And the way they did it on Tuesday, you had activities that generally went like 60 to 90 seconds at full intensity. You were not, if you watch a bad team practice and you see an activity that'll go 5 minutes, usually what happens is it's meandering, kind of slow paced for the first 1, first 2, first 3 minutes, maybe 4, and then picks up at the end. What Gonzalo Pineda is demanding out of his team is no, whistle blows, you go 100% full speed. You do not stop till the whistle blows, period. And then you're going to get to rest. And it looked really, really good. Super intense, lots of communication, good vibes, obviously, coming off of the win in Charlotte. But it was the intensity level that jumped out to me. Not long bursts of intensity, but short bursts that were useful and were important. They were working a lot on playing through pressure. They were working a lot on connecting in those moments. They were working on counter pressure. That's something that is going to be included in most of their activities this season. And look, you saw why against Charlotte. They couldn't play. You saw it against Toronto. They couldn't play out of the back. Charlotte, you forced some mistakes. You got goals out of it. That's what you're doing all of this for. So really good week, really good Tuesday session. We got to see the whole thing. Yesterday, Thursdays, just for people who might not know, we get to see the first, really varies a little bit depending on what they're working on. We get to see really through the warm-up, and through the rondos. Rondos are always part of every training session. Teams that are possession-based, that's typical. It's an activation kind of activity, but it's also a culture building activity. It's also a technical activity. It includes so many different things. So Thursdays, we only get to see through that point. We don't see what they're working on from a tactical perspective on a Thursday. But everything I saw Tuesday and Thursday looked really, really good. Players seemed to be in good spirits. Brad Gazan spoke yesterday. Gonzalo obviously spoke. It was a good week of training.
What kind of a match, and I'll preface this by the conversation that I had with Nico Moreno on Thursdays with Nico, in anticipating what kind of a match we're seeing considering Portland's current state of a lack of healthy people. I asked him, I said, are you anticipating once again a team coming to Atlanta and basically saying, all right, we're going to have you exert all the energy and you're just going to have to try to batter down this wall of 17 players behind the ball kind of a thing? What kind of a match are you actually anticipating here?
I don't think it's going to be to that degree. if it turns into that degree, I think it's because Atlanta has turned the game there. I think Portland will be pragmatic here. And I'm not saying pragmatic in a defensive sense as it gets overused in soccer. It's what the word literally means. They have certain things that they have available, and they have a lot of things they don't have available. They don't have many wingers, period, at the moment. They don't really have a number 10 at the moment without Sebastian Blanco, without Evander. So you then say, all right, well, what can I do without wingers and without a 10 to be competitive? And it really puts you into what we saw the second half against LAFC from them and the game against St. Louis. It's a 3-5-2/5-3-2 because your width is going to come from those wing backs that were playing fullback before in a 4-3-3. Gives them a little more freedom to go. And Juan David Mosquera, very good player on the right side. Claudio Bravo, very good player on the left side. They can both get forward. They can both cause problems. If you pin them in and they can't play out of the back and they just have to play direct, Atlanta will be happy with that. You're still going to have to break down a team that is going to be back and have numbers behind the ball. And there's going to be moments, like it or not, for Portland that they're going to have to do that. That's just the nature of what they have to work with at the moment. But I don't think they come in. I don't think Giovanni Savarese is sitting there with his team today and saying, don't pass the midfield line. Don't get into the middle third. Everybody behind the ball. I don't think that's his mentality. I think his mentality is to find a way to win. And he just doesn't have a lot of ways to do that right now. And that's just reality. We went through this with Atlanta United last year. And I thought one of the interesting things that Gonzalo said at media this week was, he was really happy that he stuck with his principles, his way of playing last year. Could they have gotten some results if they had abandoned those and just tried to get behind the ball and just sat back and defended because you were missing pieces? Maybe. We don't know, because just because you say you're going to defend well doesn't mean you actually defend well. If you're a team that's built to play on the front foot and you decide to play sitting back, doesn't mean you're going to be successful at it just because you say you're going to do it. But he said he was happy that they stuck to their principles and played their game because it's helping them now. Now, Portland is it's different because you're literally in the situation of you don't have width in the attacking end of the field right now, and you don't have a 10. So you can have principles of play, and I think Gio is maybe not as rigid in those. I think he is a little bit more of a, all right, I'm going to take what I have to work with and make it work and get the best results I can with that. And there's managers who have great success with it. I don't think he's a, dyed in the wool counter pressing guy. He's not a dyed in the wool, possession guy. I think he's a pragmatist, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. So I think Portland will come in and be competitive. I think they'll be difficult to deal with. I think they'll fight for him because they always do. Savarese is one of the best coaches in the league, period. And he's been able to win in a variety of different ways during his time in Portland. So if he comes in and makes life difficult for Atlanta tomorrow, I'm not going to be surprised at all. I like the matchup from an Atlanta perspective without those wingers. I like the idea of being able to create 2v1s on those wing backs and pin them in. I love the idea of Mosquera having to defend a lot in this game with Wiley and Gutman both attacking him on that side. Same on the other side with Bravo, with Araujo and Lennon. I love that. But it doesn't mean just because it looks good on paper that it plays out well on the field. How does Portland try to get a second player over there? Is it a midfielder who slides over? We don't know yet. It's going to be interesting to see. The chess match could be very intriguing here.
When it comes to participants and injuries, I guess I know a lot of folks were looking at stuff in the midweek, and that's the midweek. What do we know, or how much do we know about who may not be a part of the lineup for Atlanta United on the weekend?
I don't. What was the issue in the midweek?
What was it? Hosechu, I think, was being.
Yeah, Gonzalo said yesterday he's still out. That hasn't changed. He hasn't trained, so they're going to be careful with him, and you can be, because Amar Sejdic had a really good performance in Charlotte. A Johnny Fortune chomping at the bit for more playing time, and he's very close. He got his debut in Charlotte. Santi Sosa chomping at the bit for more playing time. He got his season debut in Charlotte after the suspension. So you don't have to rush Hosechu back with a hamstring issue that could linger if you do rush him back. So, yeah, he's out, and he was the Alonso obviously still working back from the knee issue. It sounds like from what Pineda said to the media that he had progressed and then not a setback, but just maybe a slowdown in the progression. So they've kind of reworked it a little bit. He's now pushing forward again. Don't know really timeline in terms of joining full team training, but Alonso's making progress again, which is good to hear. Hosechu, maybe next week he's back on the training pitch. And I think that's everybody else. Now, next week is a whole different conversation when you start dealing with international absences, and we'll get there next week.
I was going to say we'll postpone that one for next week. How many more minutes do we have you?
I'm free. I'm not in a rush.
Okay. The younger players, and since you mentioned a Johnny Fortune, I wanted to spend some time on what it's been like for you and Mike to see Caleb Wiley, a Johnny Fortune, and this is mainly in training and getting minutes late. Guys like Noah Cobb, a Johnny Fortune, Caleb Wiley. What's it like to see them evolve this season?
But I think it's not about just in training and getting minutes late for these guys. And, that's not the story, because these guys are full members of this club. And I think what you should have taken away from Saturday and Caleb Wiley starting it off with his performance and a Johnny Fortune ending it is Atlanta United's academy is in a really good spot. And when you have these training sessions with that level of intensity and to push the intensity as far as they have so far this season, you can do that when you have young players who can push that. When you don't have young players pushing it, when you don't have competition within the squad, it's hard to get that intensity. It's not easy to manufacture when you have a team that's been around for a long time and they've kind of been there, done that. We've talked about this with successful teams before that don't reload. Intensity levels drop. It's just, it's human nature. And when you have these young guys coming through, whether it's a Johnny pushing Amar, pushing Mateus, pushing Franco, pushing Santi for playing time, pushing Osvaldo's looking from the outside. He sees it. He wants to get back on the field because he knows, look, there's not going to be a whole lot of minutes right now. There's not. Johnny Fortune is pushing through to get him. Noah Cobb pushing through to start next week. There's going to be an opportunity for him potentially next week with Miles Robinson away, with possibly Luis Abram away. Peru's roster I have not seen as of yet. Wouldn't surprise me if Abram is part of it. And Caleb Wiley, obviously, Derek Etienne sees that. And he's like, man, I came here to start and I had the injury and I'm not getting to start over the MLS Player of the Week right now. Like, that's what you want. And then it goes further. And it goes further than that, because you're getting guys like Luke Brennan in training sessions. You're getting guys like Alan Carlton in training sessions.
I wanted to get into that, yeah.
Those guys are pushing the envelope too. And when you have all of this competition, you get better training sessions, you get more intense training sessions, and you get guys having to earn those minutes on the field. It raises the level of everything. So when the academy can get to this stage this quickly, Fortune was the 10th player to play for the first team in a competitive match who had come through the academy. And there's a whole lot more coming. When you're able to get to that point in 7 seasons to have 10 guys play competitive games for the first team, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, because this group, Fortune came in a little bit later in age, but this group with Alan Carlton, with Caleb Wiley, with Luke Brennan, Efrain Morales is still there with the twos. He's pushing. He's got to have a big year this year. He's got to feel that competition. Jackson Conway's been here from the early days. He's pushing for time. It's going to be a week where Yorgos Giacomakis is away. Jackson Conway wants to push into that rotation. He wants to get time. So when you get that, this generation from the academy has pretty much been there from day one. Few exceptions, guys coming in a little bit later, guys coming in maybe from other parts of the country, but they've grown up in the club. And I mean, I asked Brad Gazan, and the clip will be on March to Match Day later today if you haven't seen the media availability from yesterday. But I asked him about Caleb, and it's like, look, you've seen this kid out here since he was 10, 11 years old. You've watched him literally grow up in the club. What does that mean to you as the captain of the club? to see him have the performance that he did. And that's what you're trying to do, because when you can develop those guys internally, everything rises and you create even deeper than we already see now, the Atlanta United way, the Atlanta United DNA, the Atlanta United idea of how you want to play and what kind of players you're looking for.
When you have conversations with Matt Lowry about this development, what's it like to see how Matt is responding and reacting to all of this growth and success?
I mean, he's loving it because he's been there from the very beginning alongside Tony Annan and then taking over for him. And there's a piece coming on Apple TV, the Academy monthly review. Might be there now, or it might drop later today. I had a chance to interview Matt for it, and just hearing the differences in the trajectory from Caleb, from Luke, and from Johnny, like three guys who've been kind of in the news as of late. Caleb was there from a very, very young age. You knew when you first saw him at 15 with Atlanta United 2, and the guys who'd seen him in the academy before that, like, he's got everything he needs to have to be with the first team and to be a star. Luke wasn't that. Matt said, he coached Luke at U15 and he didn't play a ton. He wasn't a guy. He was kind of more of the George Campbell mold of a guy who was on the roster, had to really work for it. Also, probably grew into his body a little bit more too, which is something that's another aspect of the academy you have to manage. And Luke has really blossomed here later. Johnny came in later. Johnny was coached by his dad for most of his youth career in North Carolina before coming down at about 15. And he walked in the door as a very different kind of player than like a Caleb would have or a Luke would have in their history, because Johnny came in, had been recruited to come in. He was somebody who came in and wanted to be a leader straight out of the gates, and then had some adversity and had to earn it. But you don't have a straight line in the academy development. And I think what Matt loves, the sense I get from talking to him, is when those lines maybe do hit that little bit of adversity, maybe there is a little bit of difficulty, he loves when he sees the players push through it. And they do that with the support of the coaches, with the support of all the staff at Atlanta United, their parents as well, their friends, their teammates. When they push through that and then really come good and have those big moments, that's why people work in youth soccer and youth development.
We now have a schedule in MLS Next Pro.
Yep.
We know what's going on. We know the where. I think Abby mentioned in the Twitch pitch that season ticket holders can click on their links and they can go down that path to get their tickets. When it comes to MLS Next Pro and Atlanta United 2, what are you anticipating this season from MLS Next Pro and seeing Atlanta United 2's place in it this year? What are you looking for?
It's hard to judge. I didn't watch a ton of Next Pro last year. It is a different kind of league than USL Championship in the sense that you don't have those Tampa Bays and Charlestons and teams that have 26 to 32-year-old like fully professional guys who are either trying to win championships and make as much money as possible at that level, or trying to fight their way back up to the first division level. You don't have that. It's a younger league. So it plays a little bit differently. You don't have those games where you go to Tampa and you're playing in front of a large crowd. You don't have those games where you go to Louisville and play in front of a large crowd. I think in one way that's going to help Atlanta United too, just from a purely result standpoint, which ultimately doesn't matter in the big frame of things of what that team is there for. It's not about winning trophies for them. It is about developing players. So that's never going to get lost, even if the results get better. And if the results get better, do not allow the narrative to become, oh, well, now they've got people doing it the right way. Do not allow that to happen. I'm asking everybody listening to do that, because youth development and results are not the same thing. Do not allow that narrative to start. I just have a feeling it will. It's a different league. It's a different setup. What we're seeing already with guys coming through is huge. Now what happens, I think, in terms of Atlanta United 2, where you're not getting that test that you can then break down against, potentially a national team player on the other side. You might see some of that in Next Pro. Don't get me wrong, but you're going to have to hold yourself, and the coaches are going to have to hold the guys, and the teammates are going to have to hold their teammates to that Atlanta United standard of playing the Atlanta United way, building out of the back the Atlanta United way, counter pressing the Atlanta United way, doing all of those things, being professionals, handling moments in games. You have to hold yourself to that standard, even if the competition isn't quite as strong, or it's just different, maybe is the best way to put it. But if the results are better, and they should be, because you're playing teams that are more like you than playing teams that are built differently than you, that doesn't mean that there has been a change for the better in terms of youth development. It means you're playing in a different league. And I don't want to see that narrative start. From a fan perspective, I think fans who go to the Twos games, and there's some dedicated folks who go out and support the Twos and are always there for the Twos, I think they get it. They understand, the losing does drain on you a while, and it drained on the team at times, different points during their run in USL Championship. But that wasn't the number one goal. From a fan perspective, when you're just engrossed in the 90 minutes and you're not thinking about that number one goal of producing guys for the first team, yeah, it'll be fun. And it'll be fun because the games will be very competitive in a different way than they were before, where I think what happens is Atlanta United 2 is a favorite more often than not, as opposed to an underdog.
And Will reminds us. He says, but when you come to Huntsville, you're playing in front of a large crowd. Hunt City with Jack Collison. That's going to be a fun one for all the different reasons.
Yeah, we'll see what the crowd looks like in Huntsville. Let's see. But that's a different setup, and there's not many of those in MLS Next Pro. That is a kind of a hybrid model where roster-wise, it's going to look very similar, and frankly, I don't think Nashville's youth development is anywhere near where Atlanta's is or where quite a few others are. I want to see what they do with signing the independent guys that could break through. It's an affiliate team,
right,
in a separate market, so it's going to have a different feel than the pure Twos teams do. But yeah, that's going to be fun. And the local ones are going to be good. When you go up to Charlotte and play Crown Legacy, that's going to be good. There are more independent teams coming. We know the whole rigmarole when it comes to Rochester and how poorly that was done all the way around the horn. It just bad all across the board. Don't change it from Rhinos. This is what happens when you change the legacy name from Rochester Rhinos. You should have brought back Rochester Raging Rhinos instead of going with some generic name that, whatever, you didn't even survive into year 2. Good job, Jamie Vardy. You're going to see more. Carolina Core is coming in next year in High Point. I think it's High Point. Yeah, it's High Point. And then I'm hearing more about other independent teams coming in. There's going to be announcements throughout the year, it sounds like. So it's going to be good to have a mix. But look, and again, you want to kill another narrative. I like killing narratives. It's fun. The idea that MLS didn't want to be part of USL anymore and wanted to launch their own league, that is purely not true. USL didn't want the MLS second teams in their league anymore. And that's their prerogative. And they benefited from it, and they stabilized because of it, and it was great. I get it if you're a Lou City, if you're an Indy 11, if you're a New Mexico, and you play the two teams on the road and it's a smaller crowd. It's two teams with very different aims. I totally understand it. So MLS had to do something. You can't just say, oh, they're kicking us out, so we're not going to have two teams anymore. No, you need those. And we've seen it here personally with Atlanta United too, and how important it is. So they had to create a league, and you have some growing pains. Rochester's absolutely a growing pain. I think it will be better as we get forward and things get a little more stabilized. And some clubs, frankly, do a better job with their player development.
One more thing before you go, and it's another blatant plug. We got some stuff going on at 5:30 and 7:30 tonight. That it's games of the week, the Friday version.
Yeah, you got a big one on the girls' side with Brookwood at Archer. Archer went to Brookwood and won last time. It's a big year for Archer this year on the girls' side. The boys' game is more of a jockeying for position to get into the state playoffs. So I'm looking forward to it. We're into the pretty much flex scheduling portion of the high school season, working on what it's going to look like the rest of the way as teams try to fight to get into that top 4 in each region or fight for positioning to get forward. So really fun time. good games going on. There's players that, I feel like as somebody who's not like in the youth coaching side or in the high school coaching side, I have a decent finger on the pulse of players and teams and who to watch for. And feels like every game there's somebody who surprises me that I didn't know that is really good. The level of talent across the state is huge, and the high school game is a dramatically underrated part of that and a dramatically underappreciated part of that. And I think, you want to talk about playing in front of a big crowd. We go back to the next pro conversation. You get that in high school that you don't get in the club game and you don't get in the youth game. And that's part of development. It's part of dealing with a crowd of any size that is not your parents and parents' friends yelling at you. Now, I don't know if you're Gio Reyna and you've got his parents yelling at you, that might push you on to play well, but that's a whole different conversation that I already unloaded on Atlanta Soccer tonight on Monday and almost ran out of time in the segment because I did. You need games in front of crowds. You need games in front of opposing crowds. You need games like that. High school gives you that. There are some huge opportunities in high school for more of that. And that's something we're going to try to do here at SDH. It's something that's really become a bigger deal to me as we've seen a variety of programs all over the state this year. And some need more support, frankly, whether it's equipment, whether it's coaching education, whether it's exposure for their players. And we're going to try to do that.
Yeah, it was an example for crowds. One of the first matches we did this season, first doubleheaders, was Dalton and Johnson Gainesville, where you could not find a seat.
It was Johnson and Gainesville.
Yes, Johnson dashed Gainesville.
No. It was Johnson versus Gainesville.
Oh, that's right. That was the derby this year.
You're already forgetting things that happened this year, John.
2 years. I was 2 years back when we were doing Dalton and Johnson Gainesville. But yeah, Gainesville, the derby, the Hall County Derby with Gainesville and Johnson.
It's El Clasico. They don't call it a derby in Gainesville.
All right. Yeah, because I remember. Oh, that's right. Yeah, the full screen said El Clasico, didn't it? It did.
Don't go to Gainesville and be calling that a derby.
Okay, so it's an El Clasico because that's what
it is. One of the many El Clasicos around the state, and the Johnson girls have done really well since then. It's been cool to see. That's a program that I didn't expect to win that game, and they've went on a tear. They're going to get into the state playoffs, it looks like. So, whether it's Gainesville, whether it's the Dalton area, whether it's the south side of town, and not just Fayette County anymore. Talked to Mundy's Mill this week. Their girls are killing it this year. Rockdale has a good program over at Rockdale County this year, but then you get further out. Bleckley County's killing it. Bremen is killing it. Some really good soccer going on all over the place. It's been a fun season, and there's a whole bunch more to come.
Perry's killing it.
Perry is also killing it on the boys and the girls side.
So I've got to figure out a place to hang that. But no, it's been fun to do the high school season, and we got it at 5:30 and 7:30 tonight. I guess we got to make sure that I bring the golf umbrella to make sure that the gear doesn't get wet going to the press box. Yeah,
just in case. Any questions from the Twitch pitch I need to hit before I go?
Nope. The biggest one is talking about national team duty and how it'll impact things, but that's a next week thing.
Yeah, it's a next week thing, and I think it's going to be a 1 week thing. When you look at the schedule, like for that second game, I know we always panic, like, oh, you got called up and they're going to miss 5 games. No, they're not. They're going to miss 1 game. They might have minutes restrictions on the second game, but I don't think that's really going to come into play here. I don't expect Miles to play 180 minutes in 2 games. I don't expect Yakimakis to play 180 minutes in 2 games. The second game for Greece is a friendly against Lithuania. The first game is a Euro qualifier against Gibraltar, so I don't think he's going to play 90 minutes in that one either. Ronald Hernandez might play more minutes than anybody, honestly. And you've got cover there, so you're good. I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on the Red Bulls game going further down the line. I think it's the Columbus game where you're going to have to figure out playing time. And look, if guys get an opportunity here, they're going to be auditioning for that. Yeah, there's going to be guys from Columbus that are going to be missing too. It's never a one-way thing. So stop worrying about things down the road. Stop worrying about what about last year and blah, 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 blah. Just enjoy what's happening. It's good soccer. It's fun. This is a team that is really, really busting their to win games and to play well. And it's really enjoyable. I'm having a blast calling these games, and we'll be back at it tomorrow. We are everywhere tomorrow, from what I've been told.
Okay.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
You will hear us wherever you walk.
Okay.
7 o'clock is pregame, Five Stripes Countdown, 92.9 The Game, the Odyssey app, the Atlanta United app, Sirius XMFC, and Apple TV MLS Season Pass on the home radio option. That'll start at 7:30. So, yeah, and a full-time report afterwards.
Full hour after that. So you got a full day, sir.
Yep, that's me.